You've got to love a budget to mid-price DAC. Not everything has to be mega expensive in this pursuit. And starting with the Cambridge Audio DacMagic 200M. I actually had the DacMagic Plus about 10 years ago. That's probably before I'd consider myself an audiophile now. And that DAC stood up to the converter in a Cyrus 6 DAC integrated that I had at the time. So this 200M is in dual mono configuration with two ESS Sabre 9028 Q2M, it's a tongue twister, converters. You've got one chip for the left channel, one for the right. And so far as connections go, two coaxial digital inputs, two optical digital inputs, a USB 2 input from a computer source, and then outputs, single-ended RCA and balanced XLR outputs. There is no fixed or variable output volume switch with the 200M because you use the central volume dial regardless whether you're controlling headphones with it or you're using the volume controller on your amplifier. But there's little LEDs down the side that flash as you reach maximum and minimum volume. Obviously it's a digital volume control and it doesn't have analog stops either end. So far as formats are concerned, this is a turn for Cambridge Audio because it handles native MQA. Other previous iterations of the DacMagic didn't, but it also deals with DSD formats, PCM formats up to a whopping 768 kilohertz. So because of the little aerial down the side, this DAC can handle Bluetooth. I know some people might call it Blurtooth, but let's be honest, it's a convenience feature and it's good to have. And it might not be for us audiophiles, but the headphone socket definitely would be because on paper, this DAC looks as if it's well spec'd. Another thing to say is that you can use it as a pre-DAC and use the volume control to a power amplifier or pair of active speakers perhaps. I actually reviewed the CXN version 2 from Cambridge Audio, their streamer, a while back, and you can check my video out on my channel. But the 200M does make a case for better sound in quite a few areas when I fed the 200M's XLR outs into my amp and using the CXN as a digital source as opposed to the CXN's XLR outs alone. I found improved overall resolution, soundstage, probably dynamic capability as well, and the treble just has a nice up bite. So a quick recap of the Mojo 2. It's a smaller mobile headphone based DAC. It uses FPGA technology to do conversion as opposed to the Delta Sigma type of the Cambridge Audio. And then connections wise, you've got an optical Toslink digital input, micro USB digital input, micro USB-C digital input, and then you'll notice what looks like another headphone socket, but it's actually a digital coax input on the form of a 3.5mm jack or plug. There is no space on the side of Mojo 2 to fit a conventional RCA input. So you use these little coloured spheres, they're not balls, to change volume. Also things like crossfeed. You can make headphones sound more like two-channel hi-fi by bleeding sound from one to the other, if you don't know what crossfeed is. Chord say this is the only DAC at the moment to do lossless DSP, digital signal processing. So essentially you can set different frequency tone bands using the sphere buttons. But what they're getting at when they say lossless DSP is that there's no distortion created by adding tone to the signal. And DSP is probably the USP of this product. Too many acronyms. What's actually great about the Mojo 2 is that it's not just a headphone DAC. It's good enough to be used in your hi-fi system when you get home. So unplug your headphones and then just stick it into your 2-channel system. That's how a lot of the Mojo 1s or original Mojo used to be used. And I actually reckon you could probably get away with using the Mojo 2 in systems up to 4 or 5 grand in pounds or dollars. Stay with me with this one, but with HiFIMAN's Arya stealth magnets and some other headphones I tried, the 200M can best be described as having electrocution in the air so far as treble is concerned, and with all that resolution that's on offer. But with these HiFIMANs, it can be a bit OTT if I'm honest, so you've got to match the headphones well. But keeping to headphones and a comparison to the Mojo 2, just the dynamic heft and balls of the Mojo is so apparent when you play well-known music like Money for Nothing. There's also that space and soundstage thing that the Mojo 2 just creates. Maybe with output specs concerned, it's not surprising, but obviously a whole host of factors come into play. So what about the one that everyone raves about? Denafrips Ares II R2R ladder DAC, using resistors to do the conversion as opposed to Delta Sigma and other types of converters. I'm keeping it brief in this segment because I've reviewed it already, and you can watch my other video for a count of the Ares II. But I've decided to include it in this shootout because in some countries and some case uses, on price, it makes a possible case of being a trade-up product depending upon your needs and what you want it for. So essentially the Ares II has got the same connections as the 200M without the Bluetooth obviously, and again it's got filters like the 200M. You can tweak the sound using them. Think subtle there because these filters don't massively change the sound, and it's a nice thing to have, but it's not a deal breaker. Oversampling and non-oversampling modes are on the Ares II. It supports DSD, PCM formats like the 200M, but no MQA, and the 200M looks like a bit perfect design as well. Talking sound in a hi-fi system, going back to the 200M, there's no sibilance in the S's. You get decent soundstage and loads of detail as well. I've found that sometimes there can be lots of air in the high frequencies, you know, those kind of intake of breath type frequencies, but that also obviously depends upon the recording and the music you play as well. But I also found that it's decently dynamic, and we could go on about, you know, reviews and the normal cliches of reviews, of single item reviews, but the acid test for most people who watch reviews and know about them is when we compare. With hi-fi use, the immediate trait of Mojo2 over the Cambridge is bigger width-way soundstage and just a sense of greater ease in layering and separation in the music, I think. But mids are more dispersive and the music is coming wider from the Mojo2 to the 200M, which just seems to be more speaker confined. Music just has more separation and the bass is thicker set and more dynamic with Mojo2, and dare I say it, I think some people will love me for this, it just sounds more musical. It doesn't have the same overall sheer insight and the way that the Cambridge Audio presents treble focused in the upper mids and lower treble ranges, but I think the Mojo2 more than makes up for the other characteristics that it has that I've mentioned. So I'm not saying that the Cambridge is a bad DAC, because in the right system where the differences won't be revealed as much to the Mojo2, it's going to suit a need. Also, it's going to be cheaper in the US and it suits that kind of AV improver type system with loads of digital inputs. I've been using a really good Hegel H390 amp, my test amp. I'm using it with the Mojo2 for test purposes. So I'm going to hear the strengths of the Mojo2 over the Cambridge Audio. I think in hi-fi use, the Ares II is an altogether more wider sounding DAC than the Mojo2. It's richer, it's more refined, it's fuller sounding. On the downside, it does trade a bit of detail for tone in the very top registers, and that can be a downside for some, especially if you're headphone listening. Also, it doesn't quite have the preciseness in bass of the Mojo2. It smears more. And I don't think it pulls as much information from the recording. It's not as layered, nor can it reach out realistic, natural sibilant sounds in music. But I think the Ares II is probably the better two-channel hi-fi DAC against Mojo for the overall dispersion and lovely balanced tone that it creates. Because when it's so marked, it counts for an awful lot because of that feeling of being just around the music and like easy with or easy to the music, if that makes sense. So far as further downsides, I think it's relatively sloppy dynamically and it's flatter sounding as a headphone DAC, not width-way soundstage, but that layering of the separation of elements of music. And also it's not quite as precise and dynamic as the Mojo2. I found this pretty obvious when you try something like Underworld's Motorhome, that track on their Barbara album. Any kind of electronic music or dynamically bassy music, Ares II is a much more relaxed DAC for acoustic, simple jazz, female vocals. For the price, it's probably hardly surprising that the Ares II trumps the other two DACs in this shootout, as a two-channel hi-fi DAC I'm talking about. But in some countries, especially in the EU, it actually costs quite a bit more because we have to pay VAT. If you're buying it into the US, I don't think you pay VAT and your import taxes tend to be lower. So it definitely makes a good proposition for the US market. But for the EU, including the UK, It's not the overall proposition of something like RME's ADI2 DAC FS that I've always been raving about, both 2-channel hi-fi and headphone systems. The RME is more precise and feature-packed as a DAC, but then again, maybe not everyone wants that kind of tone. The Denafrips does have something to give with its overall lovely quality, its relaxed sound and tone. Personally though, the DAC that I like the most of all three in this test is definitely the Mojo 2, because it's just so damn good at headphone listening as a DAC and in hi-fi for more budget systems. The DSP, the precise detail, the dynamics, and just a combination of features and price. It's got it all there. I love it. Enough said. Job done. Thanks for watching.